This Friday morning, myself and Owen with you, and Nathan Murphy, come on in.
How are we? Good morning.
What was it? Was there any truth to the scurrilous rumours that you were trying to use your credentials to get free access to Shamrock Rovers the other night?
No, absolutely nothing in that. I slammed Dan McDonnell after we went off air.
Physically?
I had 2 tickets and I needed 3, was the problem.
Yeah.
So what did you do?
Well, the problem was I had 2 tickets for one stand that was sold out. So the option was let the 6-year-old go off by himself to the other stand and take my nice seats, or I did, the charitable thing for my family and we all sat together.
The charitable thing for your children. Well done.
It's kind of as charitable as sitting in the cheap seats last Saturday night in Cork Park.
Oh, wow. Well, listen, I just want to go and support my county and be around my own people. Nobody asked me to go in a nice corporate box and like Adrian Barry there.
Oh, were you in a corporate box?
Anyway, let's move on. Somebody once said to me, and there's a very wise person, when you're explaining you're losing, Nathan. So,
For sure.
Talk some football?
Let's talk some football. What game are you at this weekend?
I'm not at the game this weekend.
Ah.
I am. Dave McIntyre is covering Chelsea, Leicester, Stamford Bridge, 4:30 Sunday.
4:30 Sunday. Let's start with Arsenal Burnley because it's the first game of the weekend, and resurgent Arsenal. It looks like Ozil and Kolasinac are back. They're traditionally poor starters, so they're Burnley tomorrow at half 12. Traditionally poor starters. I think it's the first time in a long time they might actually win back-to-back games here and look likely to do it.
Well, it's very hard to know because last weekend they started with almost all of their new signings on the bench. You would assume that they're going to improve Arsenal when they come into this side. But it means that actually, as Unai Emery starts to integrate them, what we saw last week is probably going to be very different to what we see tomorrow. They've generally struggled against Burnley over the last couple of years. They get a win, 93rd, 94th minute, grind them down. There's been a lot of controversy in this fixture. And Burnley will be absolutely buzzing, obviously, after their victory last week. They didn't play particularly well in that game, Burnley. It was one of those, the wind was a gale force wind, and they took advantage of it. They played it very well. Ashley Barnes got his couple of goals. I still think with Arsenal, because it's so early in the season, we've seen little or nothing of these new signings, that there's probably going to be a bit of time of them having to bed in. And Burnley are a very solid, settled side that can maybe take advantage of that.
I wonder, Nathan, are Arsenal a little bit caught between two stools here? Because initially I was unbelievably excited when the money gets spent at the end of the summer. And then you kind of look at the age profile of the team that played last week. Obviously the likes of Joe Willock and Reece Nelson, and I think it was 3 teenagers in the starting team last week for Arsenal. And I wonder if they're looking at what's happened to some of their young talent that they've allowed to leave, like Ren Adelaide tearing it up for Angers at the moment, and Serge Gnabry's situation obviously very highly publicised. That I wonder if Arsenal are looking around at their kids and saying to themselves, God, we need to give these people more of a chance in the first team. But at the same time, they've just broken their club transfer record.
Yeah, and they never gave any of those players really a chance that you've just mentioned. And they've let another young player, Alex Iwobi, leave the club. It was the first day of the season. The players weren't ready, so they went with the kids, and the kids did all right. But you would assume that as players become fit and available, if Ozil is back, if Pepe is ready to start, that those teenagers will drop out again and will be more at the impact off the bench. And we'll probably flip, and in a week's time we'll be looking at the depth in the Arsenal squad, whereas a week ago you're looking at that bench against Newcastle and think, wow, the options that they have there. In a couple of weeks' time, once those 3 or 4 players are starting, and it's the 3-4 teenagers that are brought out of the side, you'd probably question the same thing. The biggest decision I think Unai Emery faces is what he does with Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. 22 goals last season, joint top scorer in the Premier League, but generally was played out in the left wing last season with Alexander Lacazette played through the middle. I think Aubameyang is such a talent. He's one of the most exciting players to watch in the league. There's just beautiful deft touches when he's in and around the area, and he's clinical. Whereas Lacazette, even though he's scored a lot of goals, you just feel doesn't have the all-round talent of Aubameyang. So maybe does he sacrifice Lacazette and he's that option off the bench with half an hour to go and you play Aubameyang straight down the middle with all these new signings? My preference would be Aubameyang straight down the middle rather than stuck out in the left, where often he just sort of fades out of games.
Southampton Liverpool is another game we want to talk about. 3 o'clock on Saturday. Andy Hunter in the Guardian this morning is making the point about maybe all is not quite as rosy at Liverpool as everybody's painting. Adrian's busy workload a danger sign for Liverpool, specifically that they've faced 40 shots in the first 3 games of this campaign. In the first 3 games of last season it was 19, and he does talk about the additional 30 minutes of extra time to factor into that. But
and City and Chelsea. Fairly easy start to last season as far as I recall.
That's reasonable. And you were talking to John Giles last night, Nathan, about something roughly related to this?
Yeah, a lot of the question marks about Liverpool have been this incredibly high line that they're playing, and whether it's a high line to press up further the pitch or whether it's a sort of offside track, because it's felt watching them at times that it is an offside track, that the defenders, the centre halves, don't track the runners, so that when Timo Pukki was making those runs for Norwich last Friday night, they literally just stepped up and let him in behind. Van Dijk didn't follow him, Joe Gomez didn't follow him. It seems incredibly risky and I can't imagine this is what they're trying to do, to play an offside trap up towards the halfway line. I was making the point that maybe with VAR, because decisions are always right now, that actually if your offside trap is perfect, if you have everybody in the exact same wavelength, that you're going to be okay, because the decision will always go in your favour. I suspect they are trying to play something more of a high line to push everybody up. We'll have Damien Delaney on the show tomorrow afternoon. I was chatting to him about it, what he thinks. And he was comparing it to what Tottenham have done over the last couple of years, that Tottenham quite often defend on the halfway line. And the reason for that is that it is that Jurgen Klopp gegenpress that he first had when he came in, was that the front 3, the midfield 3 are pressing, and that all the opposition can do is hoof it up. So then your centre half is picking it up in the halfway line. He takes 2 steps forward. The opposition team is on the back foot again. But it means that everybody has to be absolutely on it of that front 6. So the centre backs get no time in the ball. The midfielders get no time in the ball. And all they're doing is playing aimless balls forward that are easy for the defenders to deal with. But from what we've seen from Liverpool so far, they're stepping off opposition midfields. They're letting them play through balls. And then they're just standing statuesque and letting defenders run in behind them. You just can't imagine that this is what Jurgen Klopp wants the players to do. So clearly there's some breakdown at the moment. The other thing that style should see, and maybe this is where they would miss Alisson, is that the goalkeeper, I think, if you're playing that very high line, like Hugo Lloris would with Tottenham, generally when the ball's in the opposition half of the pitch, they're standing outside their penalty area. So they're almost acting as the sweeper. They're pushing right up. So if the ball does go over the top, they're the one that's clearing it. And I'm not sure that Adrian has that in his locker.
Is this the manifestation, Phil, good morning to you, welcome, of the hangover that has been discussed from last season?
No, I think I'd agree with what Nathan said. I think the midfield is the problem at the moment, the unit, that they're not getting close enough to opposition players. I saw it the other night with Chelsea. They'd time. Jorginho had a lot of time to spray balls left and right, and that ball to Pulisic was on. Luckily for Liverpool, the ball to Giroud was on, but Giroud doesn't have the pace that would expose Liverpool if they play that high line. So he clearly wants to play the high line and squeeze the opposition. And there was so many times watching them the other night, he can see them, and they, in fairness, they do move in a line. So there's the discipline there. It does take the odd lapse in concentration for it to all break down, and it can make you look quite foolish. But the midfield unit would be a little bit of a concern. I don't know what midfield 3 he's going to go with tomorrow, because although Fabinho scored a penalty, he was knackered by the end of the game. He could barely walk off the pitch, which made his penalty even more impressive. Oxlade-Chamberlain is an option. He obviously played in the front 3. That didn't really work, but you have to remember he hadn't started a game for over 400 days, so he is only just coming back into it. Naby Keita, again, was a player that we're all looking to see. Can he be the player that they thought they were signing? We saw glimpses last season, but he picked up a knock before the game against Chelsea. So you're looking at Jordan Henderson. Wijnaldum will play, I'd imagine. James Milner came off, he had an ice pack on his knee, but he'd probably play through the pain barrier. So you'd be slightly concerned for Liverpool going to Southampton tomorrow. They had trouble in that game last season. Obviously there was more pressure on it, but you can't drop points. And Liverpool didn't drop points against teams in the bottom half last season. So it would be a bit of not a disaster, but just wouldn't be a great message to send out, dropping points in your second game of the season.
I would say as well, there's a rush to panic around Liverpool at the moment. They've just won the European Super Cup. They started the season in the league
that nobody cares about
against Norwich, where people do care about it.
Jurgen
You might
Klopp
care
cares.
about it, but Jurgen Klopp cares. People around
Of
Europe
course he
care
cared
about
because
it.
they won. He wouldn't give a shit if they lost it.
But they
Go on.
still won it. They were 4-0 up before half-time against Norwich, and people are rushing to take the negatives. You flip that. Last season, there was a feeling for three-quarters season that Liverpool weren't playing very well. Mo Salah's already looked more sharp this season than he did at any stage last season. Likewise, Roberto Firmino, who at times just looked a bit heavy-legged last season. Now, he had no rest at all, really, during the summer, but has looked at a different level to any stage. And Sadio Mane still has to come back. So it is everything you're talking about at the moment, I think, has a bit of a health warning because we've seen very little of these teams. We haven't seen Liverpool with their full strength first 11 on the pitch yet. So Southampton away is a game that generally they have struggled with at times. And we were saying on the show last night that if Liverpool play this high line away at Southampton, if only they had a really pacey striker who's caused Liverpool in the past, that maybe they could just start tomorrow. So maybe Shane Long, who wasn't in the squad last week for Southampton, gets another run at that Liverpool defence.
Like, is it a case that people are targeting the right side of Liverpool's defence as well? I mean, you look at Pulisic, you look at the way Sané had a very good day, I thought, in the Community Shield. The left-sided players, Trent Alexander-Arnold is what I'm talking about here. It's not a new take whatsoever that he might be suspect going one way. What do you think about that?
No, he's been targeted by particularly Manchester City consistently over the years. They've had a lot of luck down that side. Trent Alexander-Arnold is a strange one to analyse because clearly defensively he's not maybe at the level of Andy Robertson, but Jurgen Klopp absolutely loves him because he's the best attacking full back probably in the Premier League. Look at the amount of assists he contributed. So Klopp obviously looks at this and thinks, he weighs up, all right, he's going to cause us problems at the back. Maybe he's not as defensively aware as you would want, but when he's on the ball, what he offers Liverpool makes it all worthwhile. So teams are going to target him. And the problem for Liverpool is on the one side, they've Van Dijk and Robertson, who are solid and as good as you'll get. On the other, is he quite sure? Is it Gomez or Matip? Matip right now looks like the better option.
But it's got to be Gomez with his extra pace with that high line. If they're playing a high line, is Gomez not a better option there, no?
You would think so, but it didn't work particularly well last week against Norwich when he was there. But he's another player who's just coming back from very long-term injuries, hasn't played a huge amount of football, so maybe there's a bit of rustiness there. I don't think the high line is going to be a talking point in 3 or 4 weeks' time.
Sure, listen, Dave, the big one in the bag anyway, the Premier League is just an afterthought, so, you know, Jurgen Klopp's celebration couldn't have been much more if they'd won the Premier League. City Spurs, Nathan, talk to us. It's obviously two of the main contenders for the Premier League. It's very early to be getting stuck into each other. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking generally this has been an absolutely brilliant game. Technically as good as it gets. Two sides who like to get the ball down, pass it around, play with a real pace. It is in a way unfortunate it comes so early in the season, particularly for Tottenham. Do they throw in some of the new players? Like Lo Celso, I don't think is fit quite yet. You would like to know who's going to be there. The impact Christian Eriksen made last week off the bench turned the game for them. Can you start him? Like, has anything happened behind the scenes with Real Madrid? What's his mentality like? He's the sort of player against Manchester City you need on the pitch, and I think City would be delighted to have this game so early in the season because generally it would be one of their trickier ones. They look like they're absolutely motoring. Like some of the play last week against West Ham was just out of this world. So I'm not as excited as I would be if this was in the middle of October because Spurs right now, as good as Ndombele was last week, it just feels as though it's a little bit too early in the season for them.
I know you've got to get away, so you're calling City obviously on that one. Any other surprises you see? United Wolves, Chelsea Leicester?
United Wolves is going to be a fascinating game because like the question mark over United is in midfield, and they were a mess in midfield, certainly for the first half an hour. There didn't seem to be any idea between the three of them, Pereira, McTominay and Pogba, as to who was playing where. Pogba'd drop up as the defensive midfielder, he'd pop up as the right-sided midfielder, very rarely in that left-sided role that we've become used to seeing him. And of the top 10 sides, certainly top 8, you could definitely argue that Manchester United have the weakest midfield. You look at that Wolves midfield, Ruben Neves and João Moutinho would walk into that Manchester United midfield. They would improve it massively. Wolves rested pretty much everybody last night in the Europa League. Last season, they had an excellent record against the top 6. They started in their opening game against Leicester at the exact same 11 as that started against Liverpool on the final day of last season. So there's no bedding in of players. It's a team and a back three in a shape that they know inside out. And I thought United against Chelsea struggled a lot when they couldn't go on the counter-attack. I think if Wolves drop a little bit deeper, Rashford and Martial just didn't seem to have the trickery or the understanding to get those link-up plays you'd want at the edge of the area. There was a lot of fancy football, and like, that's something I think Solskjaer is really going to have to get on top of the front four of Pogba, Lingard, Rashford and Martial. Like, in a way, you look at them and think, like they're playing like they're out in the streets, that sort of joy. But it's all these fancy flicks in inappropriate places. Sometimes you just need a set game plan, and I think against Wolves, like, this will give us a better judgment of where Manchester United are. If they can go to Molineux and beat Wolves, well, suddenly you're probably looking at them thinking, all right, they are the best of the rest in that race for the top four. But I would have Wolves as, without question, as favourites to win this game.
All right, big call, hot take, Nathan. Thanks a million.
Is it? All right, lads.
I think it is. Yeah. Good luck.
United didn't beat them. 3 attempts last season. They lost twice at Molineux, one in the FA Cup, and they drew at Old Trafford. So I can see why people would favour Wolves. And Wolves have this excellent record against top six. Liverpool were the only team in the top six that did the double over Wolves last season. So they love these games, and just have to be clever. Don't give United that space to play in behind, and then I think Wolves would be more than capable of getting a result here.
Do you go with Nathan on that City Spurs game? And that
I think Spurs, I thought Eriksen was excellent when he came on against Villa last week, but I don't know if they'll start him. Whereas you look at the City starting 11 against West Ham, they left Bernardo Silva and Sergio Aguero on the bench. So you'd imagine both those will come in, and Riyad Mahrez and Gabriel Jesus will probably come out, and then you pick your 4-3-3. Rodri looks like he's settled in all right, and De Bruyne looks like he's I think a lot of people have picked him to be player of the year.
He looked good last week, didn't he?
Yeah.
Sane out, and like Silva obviously struggling to get back as well. Mahrez had such a good game last week.
Yeah.
Is there like any sense that he can actually prove himself to be a success at City now and go on and kick on and fill that void almost?
You see, like, you know how good he is. I mean, they signed him for a reason, but he was a little bit inconsistent last season. I just think if Guardiola wants to get at Tottenham's fullbacks tomorrow, because Walker-Peters is still a little bit unknown. Danny Rose, I mean, we thought he was going to leave in the summer. So you think that he'll play Bernardo Silva on the right, he could play Sterling on the left, and then Aguero down the middle. Now, he could go with Jesus either, but I just think City will have too much for them. There is areas where Spurs might fancy. They could go a little bit direct if they want, because Harry Kane physically would be able for... certainly if he can get himself onto John Stones, he could cause problems. Zinchenko is a strange one in the fact that people look at him as a weakness as the left back, yet he's all the games that he started in the Premier League for Manchester City, they've won them all, which is a pretty incredible record. What is it? It's 23.
It speaks for itself. Bloody hell, Jesus. Chelsea Leicester, there was an interesting conversation, I don't know if you saw it on Sky after the games on Sunday, and they were talking about, I mean, essentially I think they were pointing to some naivety on the part of Frank Lampard, and they were talking about how teams need to be expansive in attack and compact in defence, but actually Chelsea were on the day expansive in defence, and they were saying like this points to some either naivety on the part of Lampard that he hasn't communicated to it, or the players don't seem to understand it, which ultimately probably comes back to his door as well. Like it could be that obviously Frank Lampard is still a rookie manager to all intents and purposes, and he's taken a massive step up in terms of the quality that he's facing week in, week out. So this could be something that's just a bit of a teething issue that nobody discusses again, and Frank Lampard understands and fixes it the next time. Or it could be, which is possible given that he's spent an entire career in like elite level dressing rooms, that it is actually naivety on his part. Yeah, and I think they were a lot better against Liverpool on Wednesday night in the Super Cup, and it's no coincidence that N'Golo Kante was back in and they looked a lot more stable. And I know there was a lot of people saying after the defeat to United, it didn't seem like a 4-0 game, but it genuinely, Chelsea could have been ahead before Rashford scored the penalty. It's fine margins, I know. There's a lot of positivity because Lampard has come in and he's playing these youngsters. But if Leicester, who are more than capable of going to Stamford Bridge, they did it last season, Jamie Vardy scored the winner. If they were to go to Stamford Bridge and win, that positivity, it starts to fade away. And Frank Lampard might be a club legend, but, there's only so many times you can say, yeah, he's playing all these kids. But if you haven't won a game in 3 attempts, then people start thinking, is he up to it? And it seems crazy, but
Pep Guardiola would not win the league with his Chelsea team. So Frank Lampard deserves a year to do whatever he wants with his team, and fair play to him for starting with such a young team last week.
I did say Chelsea getting into the top 4 this season will be absolute success and could be a huge achievement.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I don't think they will.
And I agree with you. We are extremely excited about this next piece of news that we have in association with Cadbury, bringing you another monster Premier League roadshow. It's on September the 4th. Gary Neville among the guests at the Bord Gáis Energy Theatre as they reminisce about his and their playing days and preview the brand new season as well. It's an exclusive off-air event. Tickets are limited. We're going to have tickets on sale very soon. Stay tuned to the Off the Ball social channels, I would suggest, over the next few hours. Offtheball.com/events for all the details there. So stay tuned. It is literally going to be a monster roadshow.